I'm here today with Mary, and you have to pronounce your last name.
Schwarzenberger.
Schwarzenberger. Mary Schwarzenberger. I am in her shop, and it is called...
Fantasy Fiber Art in Milford, New Jersey.
This is a wonderful shop. Mary has found her passion. She works with fiber, and we're going to have her teach us a little bit about how she does her fiber art today. And you need to come and visit her shop. It is totally amazing. She does garments, and she's won awards for her beautiful garments. And we'll take you on a little tour of the shop. Mary also teaches classes. You do right here in your shop?
Right here in my studio.
So you have
yes.
all these tables here,
Right.
and you teach classes. And where do
Yes.
you advertise your classes?
So my Facebook page is
Your
the best
Facebook
place,
page. So
which is
what
Fantasy
the
Fiber
na-
Art.
Okay, Fantasy Fiber Art is your Facebook page. I'll
Yes.
put a link below this,
Great,
and they can find where to come for your classes.
great.
Absolutely. This is so inspiring. You're going to love this. Mary's shop is at 23 Bridge Street in Milford, New Jersey. She has beautiful artwork on the wall. She has shelves full of items for sale. She makes fabric bowls. She makes accessories, jewelry, necklaces, all out of fiber. There are cards, little purses and bags, beautiful garments. Take a look. Just get a little... Oh.
Isn't that
Oh my goodness. Did you decorate
Can I move
that?
this? I did.
Oh my goodness. Here are a couple of garments that she made from cutting beautiful flowers out of an old vintage kimono. Here you can see she made beautiful garments using some of her quilting techniques, and her garments have won top awards at juried quilting shows throughout the country. Here are two examples of quilts that Mary has made, and she uses a fabric layering and folding technique. Let's learn about it.
Okay, this is my piece called Wavelength, which is 3 layers of silk. Only the top layer is dyed. It's ice dyed with my favorite colorways. And this one is really one of my favorites because I adore the ocean. There's nothing that relaxes me more than the ocean. I remember as a child, I practically had to be dragged from the beach when the day was up because, I grew up in the city and we got to the shore for 2 weeks and it was like, I live for this. You can't take me away.
Yeah.
So it's always been my place to go where I really want peace. And again, you can see it's the technique where you sew the channels and then alternate the pressing pleats in either direction. This is very light silk. So this is one I'm going to be backing with a piece of canvas to give it better body
More
for
body
for
for your show.
hanging.
Yeah.
It's been in a few shows so far, and
It
it's gotten
has.
great reception. I got feedback that people were intrigued by the technique, and they were all asking, "How did she do it?"
Yeah, but now they're
So-
going to know.
Yeah,
Look at
yeah.
that.
So
Okay.
very exciting. And again,
That's
this
so
is
great.
another one of these techniques where it's an obsession now, and I will do it over and over again. Talk about working in a series.
Yes,
So-
absolutely. It's very distinctive.
Yes. Hmm.
And it just the hand-dyed fabrics absolutely make this
I agree.
luscious. It's so
I agree.
beautiful.
Thank you. I have 3 pieces of fabric here. I adore vintage linens, and I adore dyeing them.
Oh.
So I have this
Oh my
piece
goodness.
of a tablecloth or something,
Yeah.
or a napkin, one of those. And I have this, I believe this is cotton. And this is one of my favorite color combinations, turquoise, a little purple. This is my top layer.
Oh, I
this
love
is
that.
another piece of linen. What I've done here is we're going to start by sewing on the bias. And what I do is when I'm at the ironing board, I fold it to make that nice 45-degree
45
angle, and then I
degree.
press it.
Okay.
This is a quilt guide, so this goes through your little hole in your foot. And what I do,
Oh,
I
okay.
always have my 6-inch rule around. Since I want to be consistently 3/4 of an inch, I will use the center line in the foot. I will measure from there 3/4 of an inch. And
Okay.
then put the screw back in and hope I don't move it. Here is my pressed line.
Yes.
That's what I'm going to sew on, so that I know that's on true bias. And I have needle down. I have tri-lobal polyester variegated thread from Superior, which is absolutely my favorite kind of thread.
Something's dragging from the back. Oh, the thread got caught
Oh,
on that
okay,
little
yes, it
post.
did.
There we go.
Okay,
Okay.
so next I will turn it the other way. You want to avoid going in the same direction all the time because you'll get distortion.
Oh.
So if you alternate
okay.
going this, because you are sewing on the bias, you don't know how
So you go one way
this way, and then I'll change direction. So I put my little thread guide right on the seam I just sewed. Needle down again, and because I set that at 3/4 of an inch.
So it's
I know
3/4 of an inch is the
Correct.
distance between the two
between the channels.
lines.
And you really can vary it. It depends on what
Okay.
effect you're after. You can make small samples and play with it until you
Okay.
figure it out. Okay, and I will keep going. So I have 3 layers of fabric. I'm going to cut between these two lines
Just
of thread. But
The whole layer?
not the bottom
Not
layer.
the bottom.
Not the bottom
Okay.
layer. You'll find that when you're doing this, if you go to the next channel, you can tell by your
The
motor
tug.
memory when you're not getting all the layers or you're getting too many. What I usually do is I will put it in and then
And just
I
sort
will
of wiggle it
I'll
around.
kind of feel the bottom, make sure that I don't feel metal of
Okay.
scissors.
Okay.
And I have a pair of those Fiskars that are easier on the hand, which
Okay.
are in a good hiding place right now.
Oh.
So I will
Oh, so you're cutting through 2 layers
cut in
then.
through 2 layers. Sometimes you can use a lot of layers, depending on what you want. So
Oh.
you can see the design on the linen underneath.
Oh, that's what it is. I
Yes.
thought you cut through,
No,
but you didn't.
No. And you can fix when you cut through, and you will do it. It happens. You can take a piece of stuff you iron on, stabilizer. Iron on stabilizer and put it on the back. You're really not going to see it when you're done.
Okay.
And then you do that. So after you do this, you're going to sew vertical rows.
Oh.
Now, I cut this to 1.5 inches. This is just so I can use it as a guide. So first I'm going to sew along the edge. And I never trim threads because that's just what I do. Okay, now you don't have to worry about distortion like you do when you're sewing on the bias. So I can sew in the same direction. Now I just
Okay.
use this as a guide. This is 1.5 inches, so
All right.
so I sewed along the edge, and I'm going to use my 1.5 inch guide,
1.5 inches.
or I could use my 6-inch ruler and sew another row. The fun part about this is you really want to be careful. Let's do needle stop down. You want to be careful that you don't sew this down like that.
Right.
You want to keep
You're
these down,
keeping
so-
it all flat?
Yes. So I just use my fingers. You can use one of those little stiletto thingies.
Right.
I can't be bothered. I just
Yeah.
watch it. And there's always my seam ripper. I use that very often when I do this. And again, my little guide here, 1.5 inches. There we go.
So you're measuring an inch and a half
from the previous
the
row of
previous row
stitching.
to
Correct.
the needle.
To the needle.
Okay.
Yes. 1.5 inches. So it's exactly what that is.
Gotcha.
Same distance. Okay. So let's pretend this is all done that way. What I would do next is I would go to my iron and I use a sleeve board and I lay this right over the edge, because as you're ironing these, if you iron this row and you go to iron the next row, you're going to uniron this row
Right.
if you work on a flat plane. So I found that just draping it right over the edge works great. And I usually pick a direction, so I will iron these this way. And because you need to coax these into place, what I do is I finger press them
Right.
the whole row
Okay.
before ironing, because it just makes life easier.
Yeah.
Because you'll see you need about 4 hands to do this if you don't do it that way. So I will iron all these in this direction. Then I skip a row and I iron the next row
Oh,
in the same direction.
Then you're not
then
interfering
you don't
with the...
yes, you don't interfere with the previous row.
Right.
And you don't get confused, because I've done things where my brain is just not engaging,
Yeah.
and I do 2 rows in the same direction. So, if it's a silly mistake, I'll make it. So then I flip it around and I do the opposite rows.
Right.
So these are pressed in this direction. These will be pressed in the opposite direction. That's how you get that overall wave effect. So here I have my little sample. Here's my little portable ironing board. I finger press these going in this direction. This is not a very well padded board. If you have a really well padded one, it works better for this. So I take my iron and I sew the pleats. No, I don't sew. I iron them
Yes.
in this direction. Okay? And because this is linen, it holds the pleats fairly well. Then, of course, we're pretending this is all sewed. I go to the 2 rows from there and I will finger press this first.
So you're kind of holding it on the
And
edge of
I'm
the
holding it
ironing
over
board
the
because
edge of the
that-
ironing board, and you'll see
keeps
why in a
you-
minute. So if I put this here flat and I try to iron these in the other direction, I would uniron these ones that are going that way. So I, again, put it over the edge. You can see through this because that's the design on the linen underneath. That's why there are holes there. And then I iron these in the other direction. And I would keep going. So what I do is I iron in one direction, skip a row, iron in the same direction, skip a row, and I keep
Okay.
going. And I can show that on this one.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Let's say I iron this that way, and I'll do it again. See, if I hold this down, I won't uniron the previous row.
I see. Okay.
So then
Yeah,
I
that
would
makes sense.
skip a row and iron again. And if this is really slippery, like the silk is, I will pin it right to the board
Okay.
to keep it.
And just go
Where I
with your
want it.
iron.
And I've even
How
used a
nifty.
smaller travel iron for this, which works
Okay.
fine too.
Yeah.
And
I
then-
can see why this would not travel well.
Oh yes.
You know?
Sending them to shows, I have to bubble wrap because, like, for example, this is silk habitai,
Yes.
and it really doesn't hold the pleats very well.
Yeah. But it's
whereas
another
my-
different effect.
Absolutely.
It's not the perfect pleats that you had intended, but
Exactly.
it still has a really great character with
Yes. The
you
overall
know.
effect is wonderful. The great texture you get
the...
on
Yeah.
it, and I just love the
Let me,
variegated
let me bring the camera up. Yeah, there
Okay.
you go.
and the variegated dyes. It
Oh,
just
yeah.
you know
It's
depending
beautiful.
right depending on the whatever color you use for the layers between the top and bottom, you get just. I mean
That's
the
gorgeous.
it's just incredible the effects you can get.
Yeah.
I just have a bunch of samples here of different things you can try with this. This piece, now you can see the pleats did not stay in really well. This is undyed fabric. This is just plain old commercial 3 layers of silk. I like it much better with something like this where you have the variegated,
Yeah.
the top layers variegated. The other layers are dyed also. And you can see how, because this is habitai,
Right.
it doesn't have much body, which is why I'm using canvas to back them now so that they have
Okay.
better body for
So
hanging.
canvas on the back.
Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
And this one
look at that edge.
I finished on my serger with my favorite thread, tri-lobal polyester.
Wow.
A 3-thread overlock stitch.
Okay. 3-thread overlock stitch.
Say that 3 times
And it's
fast.
variegated thread.
Variegated thread, yes,
Okay,
tri-lobal
great.
polyester. It's a 30 weight, and I love it. I
That
use
is
it
beautiful.
for many things. In fact, I used that thread for these stitches here,
Okay.
and I also do it for the
That
bias sewing
combination
also.
of color is great.
I love that.
Yeah.
To me, this the ocean is really a recurrent theme in my work, and this just replicates the ripples on the
Yeah.
water.
And then you made little circles
yes.
to hold
This
it
is,
down.
you know what, this is another example of what you can do when you ask the what if question.
Yeah.
You know, you're always kind of thinking, what else could I do with this technique? So one day I came up with using the eyelet stitch. The
Okay.
Bernina machine makes a little eyelet stitch.
Okay.
So I did that, and you can see, I'm not into trimming my threads. My grandmother would be horrified. She would be
Right.
chasing me with scissors. Because
They are part of your artwork.
yes, they're my
Very
signature.
much.
One of my things. This is kind of a variation on this technique. I did not do the vertical rows. This is just, if you see the stitching here, the stitching in between, it's not straight, it's wavy, and I just moved it as I sewed. Now, before I put the top layer on, I lay down all these, when you tear silk de peony, you get these gorgeous threads, and of
Threads.
course you cannot throw any of that
Yeah.
away. So I put that on the surface. I also had this lovely
A
rayon
ribbon.
green yarn
Yeah.
that I threw on the surface. And then I put a piece of thin polyester that was pretty sheer. And what I did was I called it abusing it. I kind of took my fingers and shredded it because
Shredded
I
it.
wanted the frayed effect. And you get all this wonderful surface texture.
Wow.
I mean, it just drives me crazy. I love doing small pieces like this because you get to try another one, try a different
And so
technique.
can we see the back of that?
Yeah, see
you
this
finished
one,
it like a
I
normal
finished,
quilt.
right, I
Yeah.
did. But I think, again, I'm going to put a piece of canvas on the back because,
And notice how she did these corners. That's another way to do the binding different than what I do, and I really like that. It makes the corner really sharp, really nice.
I like doing
Yeah.
that. And I discovered that when you do this, it's a good idea to put a row of stitching here because this is bias.
It will pull.
And it will stretch
Yes,
like
it'll
crazy.
stretch. Okay.
So that was another
Good
thing I
point.
came up with. This
Okay.
one I did in, as you see, completely different color waves.
Oh yeah.
Another
intense.
piece of hand-dyed fabric on top.
Ooh, beautiful.
Hand-painted fabric on the back with much lint on it.
The same edge.
Same edging with the serger. And this one, I forget what fabric I have inside, but I have a
It's a little
heavier.
more stable.
It
Oh
is.
yeah.
It is.
Okay.
This one, I played with the bottom layer, the middle layer rather, with just a whole bunch of different fabrics I just threw on there and sewed over them.
So randomly just threw fabrics on there before you put the top layer on.
Correct. Yeah, and that's why you see, you know, and because you
Yeah.
know you've got all these
Right.
different colors underneath. Some of them were
And you're
bias
just
strips.
letting them pop out.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Some of them are bias strips because if you
Mhm.
cut bias strips, you won't get much fraying.
Okay.
And these, are, of course, were the threads from tearing silk that
Right.
were left. So, and
Right.
again, hand-dyed fabric. These are all hand-dyed fabrics in here.
Wow.
So I just
Beautiful.
adore the texture
Amazing.
that you get. This piece is just this is a faux chenille technique, this wave, and this is just a piece of faux chenille that
Uh-huh.
I did. You can see on the edge the different layers. I have some home deck.
Okay.
That's a piece of, two pieces of hand-dyed
Oh,
fabric. And this print that I don't care for that color much at all, so I
Okay.
really wanted to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course use the fabric. You can't waste
Yeah,
fabric or throw
right.
it away. And this does not have the vertical rows. It's simply horizontal,
Oh, it's just
parallel rows
the
rather.
diagonal
of, yes.
parallel
Yep,
rows.
on the bias.
You cut through.
You cut through everything except the bottom layer,
The bottom.
and then you throw it in the washing machine.
Oh.
And then the bias does this lovely wiggling that it does, and you get
Oh,
that
that's fun.
fabulous
now,
texture.
How did you get this heart? The heart was dyed. on
No,
it?
no, the
How-
heart is simply another piece of fabric plopped on the top.
Oh,
So
it's
I
a
cut
separate piece
yes,
of
separate,
fabric.
because you can see the edges
Oh, I
here.
see. Okay.
There you go. And then a
how
smaller
fun is
one on
that?
top of that. See,
Yeah.
once you start playing and coming up with different
Mhm.
ideas, you just, there's no limit to what you can do.
My goodness.
It's so much fun.
Right.
And this is, of course, faux chenille here.
Mhm.
And then I made separate pieces.
Oh, it's
and
like
it
a
was-
door that opens up.
Yes. So there's 1, 2, 3 layers of fabric. And then you cut the bottom one small, then you go bigger for the
Oh, I
next
see.
layer. And again, you throw it in the washing machine and you get this
Oh,
beautiful.
After you do all that, you
After
throw
you
it
do
in the
all that,
washing
you throw it
machine.
in the washing machine.
Oh,
Then you
okay.
get this texture. You can also use one of those wire brushes small wire brush.
Really?
Yes, and
Oh
rough it
my
up.
goodness, can you imagine?
Yes, it's
That
pretty
sounds
amazing.
scary.
And for me, it's even more interesting. Let me shake this. When you have all those threads hanging, if you have this hanging in your house by a fan, it will
Right.
be alive.
Oh,
it's alive.
It's in motion.
Yes,
Okay.
perpetual motion. So it's just so much
Okay.
fun. Okay.
Okay, we're good.
Here are more examples of that. All the techniques you can do with this. This is just the faux chenille here, and then these are squares, and of course you have layers of fabric. I have about, I don't know, 5 in there maybe. And depending on what you do, I sewed squares, then I cut on the diagonal, and
Okay, so it's a big square,
Big
and
square,
then
and
one
then-
down and one across.
yes, and then sewed into
and then
4
you
smaller.
slit it
You-
diagonally.
Yep, and I have very small, very sharp scissors. You have to
Okay.
have sharp scissors. If not, it's an exercise
Maybe we
in
can take
frustration.
a picture of your
My little scissors
scissors
and me going at
later.
it. Okay,
yeah,
sure.
So everybody can see it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you start with the top layer, you cut that, and then you can see you get all these wonderful layers of
So
color.
when you're cutting, do you cut them all at once, or you just start one at a time to cut through?
I
a place
do
like
one
that?
at a time.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just easier that way.
Okay.
Because sometimes you can't be sure how many layers you're cutting through.
Right.
So what I do is I cut a tiny snip, and then
Mhm.
they're very sharp pointed, so then I
Okay.
put the scissors in and go to town.
Great.
So it's incredibly
This is
fun.
Fun bunch of colors.
And again,
there.
hand-dyed fabrics.
with that green peeking through, it's just
Right,
so.
right.
It's a surprise. I like that.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This piece is made from scraps that's people brought me from a class. Most of them are batik fabrics or hand dyes, and
teeny tiny scraps. they
Very
were
small
giving you
pieces.
Yesterday, I was
That's right.
astonished
Yes,
that
yes.
they were giving you such small scraps.
well, when I got this bag of scraps, the challenge for me was to use only those scraps and none of my own fabric, only
okay.
that. So what I do is I take a base piece of fabric. I put the pieces on there and I start to sew over them. I keep adding more and more, and
Okay.
you build up texture. And then when I'm finished with that, I will take from my lovely yarn collection. I will take these great little textured pieces and
Eyelash yarns,
Yep.
metallic yarns,
Yes.
fuzzy yarns in here.
right. This is a piece
Yeah.
of sari silk
Oh,
that
right.
frayed.
Yeah.
I'm also good at taking a bunch of different kinds of yarns and twisting them together,
Oh,
zigzag over them, and then
okay.
you have a wonderful piece of
And do your couching thing.
absolutely yes. So and
Okay.
you know again, this is another thing where you can just go wild. I started with this technique when I was doing a lot of paper piecing, where you have to be really precise and sew on the line, and I did it for long enough, and I just said, you know what, I am really sick of this. As I was sewing those, I had a little pile of scraps. Cannot throw a scrap away,
Right.
just cannot. So they were sitting there, and I thought, let me just play a little bit. I took a piece of base fabric, I started throwing these fabric scraps on top, and as I kept sewing and sewing, the texture was building, and the light went on, the fire went on. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm onto something really cool here.
Yes.
So then I dragged out my yarn and came up with these just fabulous pieces like
That's
this.
so
Another
great.
new technique. So after that, no scrap goes in the garbage.
Right.
In fact, when I do throw a scrap away, I will pause afterwards and say, see, Mary, the world did not end. This piece is probably the third or fourth one that I did after I discovered that new technique. I had all of these lovely colors from the quilt, the paper piecing that I was doing, and I just started plopping them on the surface. And what I love about batiks is you find ones where, like this one is a purple with a little blue in there. They're great for the transition when you're going from one
Right.
color to another.
Yeah.
And I found that even up here with the yellows, the greens, here's a little bit of orange and that lighter orange. They just make such a wonderful transition.
That's beautiful.
And again, all the yarn that I have just made this, it makes it all pop with all that great texture. And again, this one doesn't have as much on it, but the very fuzzy yarns,
Yeah.
when you hang this by a fan, it's alive,
Oh, yeah.
So-
Can we see the back of it?
certainly.
Yeah. And you have a little slat in there
Yes,
with eye
with-
screws to
Yep,
hang it.
yes, and
That's great.
a picture of me at 4
When
years
you
old.
were little.
Yes.
What a great tag. Oh, my goodness. I love it.
Thank you. So that's fun. This piece is 4 different pieces of the wave technique. I have the base piece in here was this really wonderful piece of silk dupioni that came from a partially completed wedding dress.
Oh.
That I inherited the remains of a bridal gown business.
Okay.
And this was my favorite piece of silk dupioni because it had this wonderful texture that I've never seen in any of it since. And I used, can you get a close-up maybe?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, if you look closely here, I took metallic paint, gold metallic paint, and I dry brushed it.
Oh. Wait, where's the gold metallic paint? Oh, on the
Very
bottom
subtle.
layer.
Right, yeah.
Okay,
on the bottom
got
layer.
it.
Very subtle,
Got
but
it.
there. And that,
Oh, beautiful. Wow.
and
So was the wedding dress white and you dyed
it was off-white. It was
Off-white, and you
off-white
dyed it that
ivory,
period?
and I dyed it that. You know, my favorite color dye is Cayman Island Green. It's a, not Pro-Chemical. It's Dharma Trading.
Okay.
It's a wonderful color. It's a combination of turquoise and green and blue, and it just you just get all these fabulous ocean-like colors that I just love. And this is one of my favorite combinations where you have the periwinkle with the
With
chartreuse.
and
and the
some
blue underneath.
kind of pale teal.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this
Oh,
is another
that's
one.
lovely.
It's just so much fun. So
Fun.
possibilities are limitless.
Endless,
Yes.
All right. And Mary has a show coming up. Tell us about your show.
I do. I have a solo show coming up at the East Amwell Historical Society in Ringgoes, New Jersey. It opens the 22nd of June. However, the reception will be the Sunday the 23rd, and it runs through the second week of July.
And so a lot of your art, your fiber art will
My
be
fiber
there.
art will be at the show.
Will some
my-
of your wearables be
My
there?
wearables will be there
Oh,
as
wonderful.
well. And they have a Facebook page, East Amwell Historical Society.
Okay, we'll put a link to that.
Okay, it'll be on there.
Okay, great.